What's up, golf friends? This is Jim Colton, and this is the Driven Golf Podcast. I'm here with my super producer, Joseph K. What's going on, Joseph?
What's going on, Jim?
It's been a long time no see. We just spent the afternoon braving the wild, wild winds of Gunter, Texas. You want to fill folks in on why exactly we do something so silly?
Yeah, we were out at the AJGA, the KJ Choi. Went and saw some stud juniors tee it up at the difficult Bridges, Texas today, or the golf course at Bridges, Texas today.
Yeah. Now, one thing you may not be aware of is KJ Choi sponsors, I believe, 3 different events on the AJGA calendar. Now, most like name tour players like Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas, you know, they sort of make it big, right? And then they give back to the AJGA by sponsoring an event, which is awesome. But yeah, I mean, KJ Choi has taken that to a whole nother level with his foundation. Wanted to give a shout out to Charlie Tucker, who won the AJGA KJ Choi. Shot a 63 in round 2 under some pretty benign conditions, but then backed it up with a 71, the only score under par in the field. The average score, I think I sent you earlier, 6 strokes higher in round 3 than in round 2, and was blowing 25 miles per hour plus, like gusts up to 45, and pretty. He was never really like out of any hole. Like he, you know, a kid from Colorado who hits the ball a mile.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, he handled that Texas win pretty well.
Yeah, handled that Texas win, champ. He's going to be playing at Colorado State in the fall. So it was really, really awesome to see, and also just the way that he carried himself and composed himself. I mean, it's easy to root for kids like that. Just a really good kid. So I'm really eager to see what he does the rest of the summer and leading into his college career. Oh, I wanted to mention one thing. This episode is on the 6-month anniversary of the Driven Golf Podcast launching.
Has it been 6 months already?
But we have a special one for episode 14 to mark the occasion.
Yeah,
Andy Johnson, like the OG of golf podcasts and golf course architecture, a fellow Chicagoan, someone who I look up to and admire. A little envious of, because he gets to talk to Tom Doak a little bit more frequently than I do. And I have to believe, like, you and I met a little over a year ago now, right?
Yep. And
I've sort of indoctrinated you with golf course architecture and teaching you some of the ways, like a young Padawan. But had you had exposure to Andy and any of his stuff, you know, prior to us really forming this relationship?
I don't think so. I kind of vaguely remember before you introduced me formally to some of his stuff. I kind of remember seeing his logo, the fried egg logo, pop up on some stuff on the charts, that and Shotgun Start. So, you know, when you've got 2 podcasts in the top 10 of golf podcasts, you know you're doing something right. So I finally started plugging into him, and he's great. He's a great follow and very passionate about the game.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that comes through in this episode. And I think it's really an encouragement to us, you know, because I think that he's somebody who just truly has followed his passion. You know, it was more or less, you know, a labor of love when he first started it, but then turned it into, you know, a golf media company that has significant presence. And actually, this is great timing, because just this week, Charles Schwab, they have this video series called The Challengers. And it's a lot of folks that are just making waves in the game in different ways. And they just dropped one this past weekend, I believe, with Andy Johnson. So it's a 5 or 6 minute clip. And I think they run commercials as well related to this series. We'll link to it in the show notes, but I think it's definitely a great perspective to know a little bit more about Andy, you know, above and beyond what you hear in this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. When you've got Rory tuned into what you're doing, I think you're doing something right. So keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, Andy. season 2 of Full Swing. I think it was the first episode. They had Rory on there, and he was in his car, and he was giving the indications in terms of what podcast he listened to, and like Shotgun Start was right there. And above and beyond that, like you'll hear Andy in this interview It was right before he left for this trip to Northern Ireland, and they launched a third or separate podcast called Explorations, EGG Explorations, and it's more of like a travel branch of the Fried Egg. So I think it highlights this Northern Ireland trip, and they had Rory on the podcast. So I would encourage folks to check that out, and we'll obviously link to that as well. So
Well, cool.
in Angle of Attack, we're continuing our series with Andrew, where we're talking about those golfers that are in that 78-ish category, looking to move down to 76. And this one, I think, resonated with me because I think I'm probably in that category. And the ones we're focusing on now are really around putting, short range putting, and like chipping proximity. And I have to say, like, even since we started this series, I've been more deliberate and intentional about my chipping and short game practice, following Andrew's mantra of not doing the block practice and like
Yep.
practicing different shots. And I think listening to this, some of the putting tips that we talk about in this episode, I need to take that into my practice. So in any case, hopefully you guys enjoy it. We've been here 6 months. Hopefully we'll be here 6 months more. But yeah, I definitely appreciate the time that we had with Andy Johnson. Andy's doing great things. And we're really excited to see, what the next 6 months bring for our little podcast. Maybe we'll be on the Challenger someday.
Something to look forward to, for sure.
All right. So with that, here's episode 14 with Andy Johnson. Andy Johnson, welcome to the Driven Golf Podcast. How's it going?
Jim, it's a pleasure to be on. I'm doing well. I'm just gearing up for a busy weekend and a big trip to Northern Ireland next week. So
That's exciting.
Caught me at a good time,
Yeah, I saw somewhere you had some passport issues. You got that all resolved?
Got it resolved. It was actually like, anytime I feel like you have to deal with the government, you're worried. It was an incredibly efficient experience. I thought, completely, I had low expectations. I think this is the key to anything like that. When you go to the DMV, just you have to have low expectations. And if you go in thinking it's going to be bad, sometimes you're, surprised. It turned out good. I got a passport in 5 days. It's kind of incredible.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I'm super honored to have you on. I mean, I consider you, we're really one of the OGs of golf course architecture discussion and discourse and golf podcasts. Like I can't tell you in the last 6 months how many times I've stared at golf podcast, Apple podcast charts, staring lovingly at both the Fried Egg and Shotgun Start, just wondering if someday maybe I could get up there in the top 5 or 6.
It's all about consistency. I'm super lucky. Listen, like everything's a lot of times like intersection of luck and opportunity. And when I started podcasting, there just weren't a lot of golf podcasts around, and I think that obviously is a huge advantage. Because there wasn't as much competition as there is now, but I think like what the key is, and one of the blessings I always think about is like I was podcasting when it was so rudimentary that my podcast, what I used for podcasting, it didn't even tell me how many people were listening. So like, for like 2 years of the podcast, I had no clue how many people were listening. And I think that's actually a really useful thing to have. You could draw parallels to almost any other walk of life. I think I'd imagine if you started a golf career trying to play golf, if you didn't keep score for 2 years, you might end up being in a better spot than if you were very focused on your score, because that leads you down rabbit holes and different things. And it could, in the podcast space, I think like, I think the key is like doing stuff you're passionate about, because if you do stuff that you're passionate about, I have this theory that there's thousands of other people on the internet that like that too. So that's just my general theory, is like, if you're super into it, or if anybody on my team's super into something, yeah, do it. because that means there's going to be a lot of other people that are super into it.
Well, I think you've proven that to be true for sure. Before we go there, because I do want to get back into some of the early days, the humble beginnings, and really sort of the evolution to what it is now. A couple of things, like we go back a little bit. I think we met. It was probably a Doak Cup
Yeah, Stoughton
2017.
Bray.
Stoughton Bray.
When
You were
Luke was a little guy.
Yeah, he was 10. I brought a 10-year-old to the Renaissance Cup. He's my partner. We won a match too.
I've been watching his career since then. It's like, God, it's amazing to see. I love following you and living vicariously through you, who's living vicariously through Luke. You know?
Yeah, well, it's definitely felt. I mean, I know you've mentioned him in your newsletters, on podcasts from time to time, and it's always fun. I'll get a text from somebody saying, "Oh, you were just mentioned on the Fried Egg podcast, you and Luke or whatever." So that's been cool. Yeah, you were with DJ Pyhowski, I think was your partner, and
Yeah.
I remember you guys flying your drones around Stoughton Bray.
We
days,
shot some stuff. Yeah, that was really early days. I was so bad at flying a drone. We shot some stuff with Tom that never saw the world, but I thought it was actually would have been good. I got to see if DJ still has that laying around somewhere, because we shot some stuff of him breaking down that the short par 4 on the front 9. What would it be like? It was 7 maybe, with the narrow green that you play and you could play off to the side. We did something kind of cool. I got to see if he still has that footage. It would be fun, because obviously I think this was just at the beginning of, maybe right when he started working for No Laying Up. It might have been right around that time. And it would have been just like very early day golf.
Because I think it was right around the launch of the Golfer's Journal, because I had written an article for the first one on Ballineal, and that was the first time DJ and I had met, and I think it had just come out, because I think he actually had a copy there and he gave it to me. It was the first time I saw it. And so it was right around that time.
Yeah, those are very early years of everything that now it doesn't feel like the early years anymore.
I have to admit, there's a bit of a running joke in my circle of friends, because I think around the time you probably started up, one of my close friends, Wyatt Halliday, I don't know, you may know him or not, he said that you and I sounded a lot alike. So basically, it's still a running joke with my friends today that we sound exactly the same. So I think during this podcast, I may have to say Andy, and you may have to say Jim, so we can discern who's actually doing the speaking, not to confuse any of our listeners.
I get a lot of feedback about my voice, so that's I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse.
I think it's just the Chicago is coming out in both of us, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about your days growing up in Chicago. What was your start in the game? And I think we probably played a lot of the same courses back in the day.
Yeah. I grew up in Lake Bluff. People that are like super golf nerds know it, because that's where Shore Acres is. I grew up at Lake Bluff Golf Club. I started to play around, like, I got clubs. My birthday's in April, and I got clubs, my first set of clubs in when I was like real set of clubs, like that I could go use outside of like, club here, there. I got that at my 10th birthday, which was 1996. So after the 96 Masters. And then
okay.
Tiger wins. So at that point, I'm kind of like hooked. We had Lake Bluff Golf Club had a season pass. I think when I was 10, 11, it was $190 for the year for a junior. Wow. I mean, talk about like, I don't know if those still exist, like if that type of program still exists for kids.
It needs to, if it doesn't, for sure.
It was the greatest thing in the world. My buddy, who is the same age as me, we grew up on the same street, and we grew up playing wiffle ball golf around our street. So we just hit balls to holes. So that buddy, he was a really good high school player, all-state high school player, but he he is now the founder of Chaplin Bags. I don't know if you've seen Chaplin
Yeah, yeah,
Bags,
sure,
but it's
sure.
kind of cool because we grew up on the same street, really like picked up the game at the exact same time and grew up playing wiffle ball golf around. And now we're both like in golf, which is kind of crazy. But we grew up like we'd put our bags on our backs and ride our bikes to Lake Bluff Golf Club, and we'd spend all summer there. When I got to age like 13, I started caddying. So I caddied at Conway Farms at first. Jeff Morey, who's the director of golf, is still there. He was the head pro then.
Oh,
So like I always laugh that he was like my first boss in golf. Uh, but he is so yeah, I guided there, and then I went over to Knollwood a couple years later because I knew the head pro at Knollwood went to my church that I went to as a kid. And so I went over there and kind of did caddying and bag room. And I was there. I taught junior golf. By the end of it, they had given me like practice privileges, which was great as a high school golfer. I could like, I had like a better place to practice than Lake Bluff. And yeah, from there, went to college. I went to the University of Illinois. I tried to walk on a couple times there. I played well, but didn't make the team. And it was one of those things I could have played at like some smaller schools, but I got into Illinois and I was like, I should go there, better education. I didn't ever think I would be like in a golf pro, like trying to play professionally. So, but yeah, so then I went there and, I guess, you go to college. I would caddy in the summers, but you lose touch a little bit. And I'd play some amateur stuff, but you lose touch with the game, especially later in college after I was done trying to walk on. I lost touch with the game for a couple of years. I took one summer, I did summer school down there. I only played like a couple times, but then when I got out, I started playing again and playing well in some stuff and played amateur stuff and stayed connected to the game and, was working in Chicago, lots of different sales jobs, going down to Ravislow every weekend. I
there
mean,
you go.
I think about my years, years of your 20s, and I don't know how you think about them, but I mean, I would be out at night, and like my roommates at the time thought I was crazy. Because I was like, I'd be out till 2, and I'd be up at 6:30 to go like hit Ravislow early. I'd play, I'd practice a little bit, and then I'd come back, and we'd be like back out at 2 p.m. Like we'd be either on, like we had a rooftop deck that we'd play bags on that was like a shared for our building. We'd play bags on. And then the next morning I'd be back up in the morning, back down to Ravislow. Like that was, and then, I'd play weekend tournaments, a couple tournaments here and there, like state stuff. But then eventually I got in this tech startup scene in Chicago, and that's where, I learned about growing companies and building something from nothing. And the last job I was at was a tech media startup. And that job, I had gotten a more senior role, and I was interfacing with a lot of entrepreneurs. And that at that point, I really was like, I can do something on my own. And I started to think about what I could do. And that's how I started the Fried Egg. So I just gave a roundabout answer that got you through 20 years of life, I guess.
Yeah, I wanna pause a couple. Like, there's a lot of commonalities there. I did caddy in the western suburbs. I grew up in Geneva, caddy at St. Charles Country Club. But
I played
you
a state
stuck with.
am there. That's the state am that Nick Hardy won, shot 28
Oh,
under.
okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, he went deep.
That's great. That was bananas. I mean, everybody's like, oh, I think this guy could be a PGA Tour player. Like when people say, oh, I think so and so could be a PGA Tour player, I will always point to, well, Nick Hardy shot 28 under and
Yeah,
won
yeah.
a state am that has like guys that have had Corn Ferry Tour status on it in the event, beat the nearest guy by 10. That's a PGA Tour player.
Yeah, it was cool to see him get his first win last year. But yeah, so I also went to University of Illinois, probably 10 or 12 years ahead of you. But I wasn't a great caddy because I always wanted to play golf. I never really liked watching people play golf. I caddy more now than I think I'm a better caddy now than I was probably 30 years ago. But we're fortunate having grown up in Chicago, where it's really like caddy epicenter, like kid caddy epicenter of the world, right? What they have in scholars. And I think the cart ball generation, wiped out a lot of potential golfers because I think a lot of people's introduction to the game was really through caddying. The love of the game came through caddying, playing on Mondays and all that sort of stuff.
I think the biggest thing with caddying, I feel like, is like the social stuff. Like sitting in the caddy shack, you learn like patience. I mean, I think back to you get there at 6 a.m. and some days at noon, you haven't gotten a loop, or 2 p.m. and you leave and you sit somewhere all day and you don't get paid. And that sounds harsh, but it like teaches you patience, that nothing's given to you. But then I think the biggest thing is interacting with the people you caddy for.
Yeah, for sure.
You meet every single type of personality, and you are thrust into uncomfortable situations. If you're a kid, you're caddying. You're a 14-year-old, and you're caddying for some of the most successful people in the world, and you're learning how to make conversation with people that you have nothing in common with. And I think that was like, I always think back that I think that's the most invaluable aspect of caddying beyond being around the game. I think like is just the social skills that it teaches you that you're forced to have if you want to be good at caddying.
Yeah, for sure. And then you think about just even getting paired up with somebody who, they may be a complete stranger at the beginning of the day, and you're going to spend 4.5 hours with them, right? Like it could be super icy, and you can like, stick to your corner or your buddy that's there, or you could like try to engage them and get to know them a little bit. I think what I found through the game, which has been really cool, is you start talking to these folks and you realize that, this circle of hardcore golfers isn't really that big, right? So there's only 2 degrees of separation, I think, between you and the guy that it was a complete stranger at the beginning of the day. So it's pretty neat to see.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of the game of golf, right? You go, and if you meet somebody at a random thing that golfs, you usually have no shortage of topics to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right. So you mentioned you worked in the tech industry. You had this sort of entrepreneurial bug, but what was like the early days of the Fried Egg? Because I imagine you didn't just like quit your job and then start writing about golf, right?
Yeah. So I would write it at work a lot of days. It's amazing. I started writing it. I got some really great advice from a guy actually that played golf at Illinois, Andy Mack, who was the same age. He was an entrepreneur. He had a mobile app company, and I was meeting with him, and I said, I got this idea. I think I could do this. And he said, listen, I spent months trying to perfect my idea. And the best thing you can do is just go start doing it and see how people react to it. Don't waste time thinking about what you're doing. Just start doing it. So like literally it was a morning meeting. They went to my job and I wrote the first Fried Egg newsletter. And I was like, I'm a horrible writer. Like, I think I've gotten better. I'm probably maybe like passable now, but at the beginning, I was an awful writer. Like grammatically, just like sentence structure, stuff like that. And luckily, my wife was a journalism major. And the first time I wrote the newsletter, I was like, she was my girlfriend at the time. I'm like, I wrote this thing. I want to start this company. Can you edit it for me? She ended up in tears trying to edit it. It was so bad. She couldn't understand, like grammatically, like made the turn at 3 under, shooting a 3 under 32. That like grammatically, I guess, doesn't make sense, right? And every golfer that makes sense, but
yeah.
from like, and she's not a golfer, So she's like, this doesn't make sense. I'm like, it makes sense. That's how golfers talk. That's exactly how it should be. And so anyways, that I started doing that. And I mean, at first it was just a 2 day a week newsletter. And the idea was like, I could write on Sundays because I'm off work. And then between Monday and Tuesday, I could get one out on Wednesday. And I started doing that. I sent it to 10 people. The first one I sent to 10 people that were like family friends, and people liked it. So then I went through my email and found every person that I could think of, whether it was like people I'd caddied for, people I played golf with in tournaments, friends that golfed, friends of friends that golfed that I was on an email chain with. I sent it to them. That was like 200 people. And then it was kind of off and going. Um, and so then I was doing that for weeks, months at my job. And then I kind of like, it was growing well. And I became less and less engaged with my job. And I was going to, my boss and I kind of had a little bit of a falling out. And I was going to take another job. And one of my clients at my last job, who was an entrepreneur, was like, hey, I'm really into what you're doing. What if I give you enough money to live off of for a year and you see where this goes? I really he liked the newsletter. And I think more so we had worked together for a couple years. He was like one of our, at that media company, one of our sponsors.
Mhm.
He just was more of a bet on me, and he thought I could do something. And so then I took that money. It was a small sum. It was $50,000, and I lived off of that for 18 months. And it was quite a change in life from my previous job, but it gave me the opportunity to really go. And from there, that's when I started writing on the website more, which the website was built to get people to sign up for the newsletter. And then eventually, as I started to cover golf architecture, I realized like, hey, these conversations, or these articles, like there's deeper conversations to have, and a podcast would be a really good avenue for that. And that's, I started doing the podcast. And from there, we've been pretty much bootstrap business, 8 years in, outside of, the initial capital, and a few other, like a little bit of other cash. And we've kind of built it from there. But yeah, the early days, I miss them so much sometimes. Like there was like something really beautiful about, I would wake up. We lived in the city. My girlfriend, my wife, then girlfriend, and she would go to work, and it would just be me and the dog. And I would just like sit there and be like, "What am I gonna do? What am I gonna write about today? What am I gonna like dig into and read about today?" And I miss the freedom of that a little bit, because you think about like we can do way more creative, like never, I don't think ever in my life I'll have that time back, like that ability to do kind of anything on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's really cool. So at what point did you go from like one employee to two? Like that had to have been a huge step. It's like this job is getting bigger than I can handle on my own, especially with trying to run a tight budget as well. Like what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. With every person I feel like I've hired, I'm terrified to hire them. Absolutely terrified about like, can I afford to do this? Can we do this? And then without a doubt, every time you hire someone, about like a month in, you're like, why did it take me so long to hire this person?
Yeah.
But with it, like, I mean, a big part was like, we had my wife was doing editing. She knows nothing about golf, and she didn't want to be doing this. Like, she was kind of doing this out of necessity. I was writing more and more, producing more and more stuff. And like one of the things I saw was, so Garrett Morrison was our first hire. is that Garrett had written a couple blogs, and I read them, and I was like, this guy might be better than me at this. Probably
Yeah,
is better than me at
he's a
this.
great interviewer, by the way. Yeah, he's fantastic.
So I need to hire this guy, and he's going to help us do more. So it was, I mean, he was teaching at the Stevenson School in Pebble Beach, a private boarding school. He was teaching English. And, I never met him before hiring him. Like I talked to him on the phone a couple times. He had edited a couple things for me. He had guests written on the site. And then I hired him. And the first time we met was when he was like, it was like a week before he was starting. I was out there for the US Open. He was driving up to Portland to where they were moving. So he was moving. I was there. And that was the first time I met Garrett. He had already had the job. I think this was before like video calls too. Like, so I never I didn't even know what he looked like.
Have you
Um,
ever
but
had Garrett in tears as well, editing your stuff?
he would never tell me. That's the thing. One of the things early on, Garrett, I was making a real attempt at teaching me about like how I could become a better writer, and I think he gave up on that years ago. Now,
I have to say, I mean, one of the broad appeals of you and your brand and everything that you built, I think, is just this authenticity. The passion shines through. The passion is what carries the day. All these quirks or whatever, they're charming to like your followers, and like, the emotional outbursts on the podcast stuff. Like, people love that stuff. Like, people want to hear about all that stuff. They feel like they're part of your family because you like brought them in and you've like laid like your soul out to them over the course of these years. And I think that's a huge draw. Like you said at the outset, it's just like being true to yourself and giving yourself a voice and letting people inside, really.
yeah, authenticity's been one of the pillars of what I set out to do. Like one of the things that I looked at in the golf media space was I felt when I started it that everybody was extremely conflicted. That like because of the way their business models were tied up, you're taking money from people who want your voice in return. And what my goal with everything was, and obviously it's very hard to do this, but you have to be patient. It's like I don't want any partner of ours to be partnering with us to get me to say something that I don't believe in. And that's been like the biggest thing is that we are very honest, and that's the one of the core tenets of the business. But then the other thing that I think like it's hard to like come out of your shell and be you. And that's what I try and do. But one of the I think like one of the things that I've learned from doing this is if you do something cool and different, people are inevitably going to copy you. That's going to happen. And what I've kind of learned is like, they can't copy me. So if I just am myself all the time, then that's going to do that's going to do the work. That's going to outpace the competition. There's a great quote. There's a tech entrepreneur, Naval. He's been on some podcasts, and I'll never forget it. I listened to one of the podcasts he was on. I can't remember what the title was. He had this quote that's like stuck with me. I think about it like almost every day. And the quote is, authenticity outruns all your competition. So, I think that like the shotgun start, for example, has completely changed a lot of the way pro golf is talked about. Like, it has shifted shows. There are like a lot of shows that have completely different formats now. And really like that's just me and Brendan, the way we would talk if we were in person.
Yeah.
And there's no, we don't talk about what we're going to do. There's no planning before. It's like, I watch golf, you watch golf, and let's talk about the golf. Like, that's the way it works. And we're both just ourselves. And I think, like, that's what I always think about is, like, just be authentic to yourself. Just authentic. Like, if you're just yourself, then you're never going to have to apologize. You're never going to have to, like, because that's just who you are.
So the shotgun start started a little over 5 years ago, right? So you obviously had to make a decision. It's like, I have one podcast already that I'm cranking out, and sometimes it's hard to keep up with them, right? To deciding you're going to do this other one multiple times a week, like that seems like another leap of faith that you had to make along this journey.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Obviously it was hard. Like, I don't think I understood the undertaking that it was going to be, and being naive. I was like really naive when I started the whole thing. I've said this to other people. It's like, if you told me, like, go start from zero today, I don't think I could do it. There's no way I could do it again. From zero. But with the shotgun start, I think I was extremely naive to how much work it was going to be. And that's where having Garrett, for example, has been invaluable, because he's been able to take over and do and take on like a 50% load on the Fried Egg podcast. But yeah, the shotgun start, I think, like, one of the things that I thought it was, like, when the Fried Egg started, it was a newsletter about professional golf. And I had always been very interested in golf architecture, and that's what I thought would work really well for long form web content. Like, I thought architecture stuff, and I always had kind of a plan because I was interested in it to cover that, but it wasn't like in the newsletter. And then I became known. Everybody's like, "Oh, he's just an architecture guy."
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, no, like, I've got opinions about pro golf. And that's how that started. And Brendan and I had been talking. Brendan had been a regular on the Fried Egg, and we had been talking about, what could we do differently? And we had been talking for like a year plus about this idea. And then, like anything, it's just about starting and going. And one of the easier things about that was, like, we weren't starting from zero. And that makes such a big difference, is that we had a built-in listenership from the Fried Egg podcast that came over. But I mean, what we started that show as versus what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, we just let it evolve. And I think that's like another just thing I've learned is, don't get stuck on what you think something's going to be, and let it move. Let it meander, because usually it's going to find its way into exactly what it should be. So that show, yeah, that shows, it takes up a lot of time, but it's super fun. And I think, like, it's been fun to do.
Yeah, it's obvious that you guys are having a blast. And I would say, I don't know if this is true for everyone, but for some reason, my wife and I, like, our podcasts are on the same Apple account. So, like, I have a pretty short commute. So I listen to Shotgun Start in usually like 15-minute spurts. Sometimes I get in the car, and, like, wherever my wife podcast left off, that's like the first thing that comes on the car, and vice versa. So anytime I mention your name, she's like, "Oh, I jumped in the car and there's some guy was screaming about the Bears or something. Like, what is this podcast?" And I'm like, "No, it's actually a golf podcast." It's kind of funny. But yeah, you, like, I don't think I could start the Driven Golf podcast on some, soapbox tirade about, like, the Illini or something like that. It might, maybe,
I think you should have started it with the Wagger files.
Wagger, man, yeah.
I think that's your soapbox. You have shed light on something that's very unjust to me. I will never look at the Wagger rankings the same again.
this is a good time for this because we were talking about the shotgun start. And I wanted to mention the Friday golf advice column where you get the people send in the letters or whatever. The one that left a mark on me simply because I'm in the Dallas area. There was one recently last summer around the Cowboys Golf Club.
Yeah, the fight.
Which is, yeah. There was the fight where there's a family who was getting a picture on the star. And that course is like unwalkable. Like Luke played in a tournament there his first summer here. And we had, we just moved to Texas and it's like all of a sudden it's 111 degrees and they make him walk that course. But in any case, he's vowed never to set foot on that golf course again. But I was hearing you guys tell this story and I could picture this hole. I think it's the fourth or fifth hole. And it sort of started this meme, right? This kind of like people write in and it's like, I forget what the exact tagline was, like, 50 years old, married, no intent to fight or whatever the case may be. But I was thinking to myself, like, if I had a category, I've never been in a fist fight, but I'm not opposed to one. Actually, I think I could handle myself pretty well.
You're interested in fighting.
And it's around these things that get me worked up. It's just like things just being inherently wrong for no good reason. And I think the Wagger thing has really struck a nerve with me just because it's just so wrong. That, and I'm just on.
You just have to keep going. You just have to keep going. If you believe in something, you have to keep going. Yeah.
So you will appreciate this because this is actually a good time to plug it. So I created and posted so there's a power ranking, which is like the strength of schedule measure that's in Wagger, which is like a complete black box. Like it's a complete like government mystery. Right. So, and it's important because they even say on their website, it's important for golfers to know what tournaments to select because it actually could hurt your ranking or whatever if you select the wrong tournament. The RNA runs it. So I emailed the lady at the RNA. I'm like, can you fill me in on this power ranking? Like, it just seems like a complete mystery because some tournaments get 100, some tournaments get 20. Like, there's no rhyme or reason for it. And she said, well, this is intellectual property. I can't share it with you. Well, so then I just started picking the thing apart based on all of the public information they have on individual tournaments and actually cracked the code like last weekend. So then I decided I'm just going to publish it, widely. So anybody could, because they even say like Wagger is designed to be a service to golf and like serious amateur golfers. But if you don't know how it works, like how can you make an informed decision around it? So I'm trying to like demystify a lot of that. So
I did one of my early articles was a takedown of the Digest course rankings. This is similar. I broke down like all their criteria and just like what does this mean? What does this mean?
Well, now you got me all worked up. But so I'm gonna keep fighting the good fight. Now I know at least one person is listening, so this is great.
I'm
really,
listening.
Really encouraging.
There's a kid on Southern California kid that you posted about today, and I saw where he was in the Wagger. I was like, oh, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, the USGA is aligned with the RNA on Wagger, but the RNA runs it. And I think the USGA is just kind of jumping on board with them. In the meantime, they're basically preventing the best U.S. boy golfers from actually playing in their national championship. Like, that can't be the intended consequence, right? They're basically co-signing for that unknowingly. So
I really disagree with it. If we want to get in a rabbit hole, I'm so out on the new USAM qualifying. I think it's terrible.
It's tough to schedule, honestly. Like, there was
the cost is insane.
Yeah. So we're trying to navigate all the USGA qualifiers this year for my son. And yeah, it's tough. Like, there's actually only a few that work. And then like a lot of the final USAM qualifiers are actually the same time as the actual US junior tournament. So those are off the list. And, you're really only down to a few. It makes it very, very difficult. Like, we're going to be going to Ohio or something like that.
Let's make the game more inclusive and approachable, right?
Yeah. So anyways, you mentioned you've been sort of coined the architecture guy. I do say this as a compliment. I think that you have made an indelible mark on the dialogue around golf course architecture in a really meaningful way in the time since Friday has started. And I can tell you, like, I was doing some like corporate training, like presenting as a corporate training. And I always talk about like I have this background in golf or what have you. And a couple guys came up to me and is like, "Oh, you're in the golf course architecture? Do you know Andy Johnson?" So it's like, I think you've made it very accessible and very attainable for people to understand some of these concepts. And then I think get a deeper and further appreciation, not really just for architecture, but just like the game itself. And I think that's really been, I think, the gift that you've given back to the game is just through your passion and through articulating some of these concepts and making it very accessible for people. So yeah, I just want to thank you on behalf of all golfers, because I think you're putting out a lot of great content for even for like, sophisticated architecture nerds are learning something, and then actually introducing folks to some of these things, which helps them gain an understanding of like, oh, what, now I can begin to understand why I like this golf course so much versus another. It's been really cool.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think about the golf course architecture so much. It's like, if you have just at least like a basic understanding, it makes playing golf so much more interesting, because it's not all about like, did I hit the last shot great? Like, you're looking around, you're appreciating little things that are happening. You're interested in like, if you hit a bad shot, I a lot of times get excited. I'm like, oh, I'm excited to see what it's going to be like to hit a shot in from over here. And it just changes the whole mentality of the game. I think about, before I started, I was interested in architecture. I'd read some books. I had I was a caddy, so I think that like gets you a really good understanding when you have to coach like a 20 handicap woman who can't hit the ball high. Like, if you're caddying well, you're getting them around the golf course, and that is like the bare bones of strategy. You have to understand strategy if you're going to do a good job getting that type of player or a senior around a golf course. But for me, going from where in my late 20s I was like hyper competitive with golf, to my job kind of necessitated that aspect of my life to go away. And now, where I'm just interested, I'm out there playing. I still care about playing well, but like, my mentality and my approach to the game is so much better. Just from like, I don't get upset when I hit bad shots. I'm actually excited. I'm like, sometimes I might get occasionally I might get irritated if I'm playing well, but like, it changes your prism in which you look at the game, which I think is super valuable, and the game would be more popular if more people were into it.
Yeah. And I think you have this nice benefit of having been a very good player. I'm not quite as good as you, but like you and I have the ability to hit good shots. Like, we can visualize a shot. And I think one of the thrills of the game, if you're not keeping score or whatever, is like trying to pull off a shot that you're not 100% sure that you're going to pull it off, but like, it's in there somewhere. And I think it is sort of like you said, like, you deal with the consequences of that, the thrill of pulling it off, or like the consequences of not pulling it off and being in some tough spot, and then you just take on the next challenge.
I love like a Redan hole, right? Like, I always try and play the slope now, even if like it might not be the smartest play. And if I've missed occasionally long right, and I'm just like, oh my God, like, that's going to be awful, but I can't wait to get there and try and hit it. Like, I know I'm probably going to make a double, but like, at least, because the payoff when you hit that top right corner of the Redan and it just like funnels down to the hole, it's so cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, speaking of architecture, I think you and I would both qualify as what I would call FODs, bona fide friends of Doak. I think mostly because of our love for architecture, we've gotten to get to know him over the years, and you have really established this relationship with the Yoke on Doak podcast, which has been fantastic. Like if I see the new yoke on Doak, I'm instantly clicking on it. I've submitted questions over the years. So how did that all come together? Because that seems Tom could be an intimidating figure, right? But I think like, hey, did you pitch this idea to him? Was it a bit of back and forth? How did it all come together?
So I first met Tom. I qualified for the U.S. Mid-Am at Stonewall, and it was right when I had started the Fried Egg. And I introduced myself. I told him what I was doing. I don't think he like really probably remembered me at all. It was like a big, but then I asked him to come on the podcast. And this was like I think it might have been like episode 16. I mean, it was like very early days. And apparently, so Elliot Ross was working for Tom at the time. And Elliot called me and he was like, "Hey, would you be interested in doing, a regular series with Tom? He got so much positive feedback from that first episode he did with you, that he'd love to do more of that." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he was doing so the first batch of those beyond like that first interview I did with Tom, the first batch of those we recorded at Stream Song. He was there for something, and we did like 3 or 4 hours of recordings, and we cut them up into different episodes, and that's how the whole series used to work. Was I would just go to him. I think one time he stopped at my house and we recorded lots of time in Traverse City. And we do it, and then the pandemic kind of changed it to where we started to go remote. But before that, we had done them all in person. Um, and now I feel like we're both. He's so busy.
Hmm.
My travel schedule, like it's so rare that our travel schedules align, um, to do them in person. But we do them, not together. You know what? A funny story from from that. One time I went up there, we recorded like 3 hours of audio, and I got home. I think I cut up the first one. And these audio files before there were these software. This is like the old school audio
Yeah.
stuff. Um the audio file, I cut up the first one and somehow I messed up saving the second one, and I might have been cleaning up my desktop and threw out something that was important. And I lost like the last like 2.5 hours. And it was like I felt so bad. And I had to tell Tom, I was like, "Tom, I lost like the last 2 hours of that discussion." It was like a 3 hour discussion. And apparently one of my buddies ran into Tom at Crystal Downs like that weekend. And he said, "Oh, I'm friends with Andy."
Oh no, bad timing.
and uh, and Tom said something. He said like, "Hi, hello," and he goes, "I hope you're better at recording audio than Andy," or something. And I just like, I think it was, but I felt so bad messing up that recording. But yeah, it's incredible. I had Brian Palmer.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know Brian.
Tar 80, yeah.
He
Shore
texted
Acres.
me, and I had never really thought about it, but I mean, we've done something like 40 episodes. And he texted me something along the lines of like, you realize like you've done like you've created this like library of one of the greatest architects ever talking about like it's going to be invaluable stuff years from now. And I think that like I never really thought about it in that lens. And I think it's like really that's probably the most neat thing about it is 30 years from now it'll be something where you could go back and listen to Tom talk about building Bandon Dunes, or maybe they're doing a restoration at one of his courses, and there's an hour-long conversation of him talking in like nitty-gritty details about it, which I think is really cool. It's been fun to see the different architects how their brains work, right? Like Tom loves to get into the nitty-gritty. Bill Core just loves to tell stories. Um, Gil's kind of like a mixture between the two of them, and yeah, it's the Tom stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a great guy. I feel like he's like the most misunderstood person in golf. Like you see people say he's like he just loves talking about golf. Like if you
Oh
if you
yeah.
talk to him about golf, he'll just go. He just goes, and he's always been super generous with his time with me, and it's been I mean, it's been an amazing thing to get to do. I've learned so much from that, and then like some of the amazing stuff like is we finish recording and I'll start talking about something else, and you're like, God, this is I wish I was still recording.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, we talked about authenticity. I think Tom, I mean, he doesn't know any other way, right? He absolutely doesn't know any other way. So you get him started about a subject matter that he loves and knows literally more than anybody about. Yeah, he could talk for hours. I mean, I think some of my favorite moments at either the Renaissance Cup or the Doak Cup is just sitting back and just listening to the guys tell stories and peppering him with questions every now and then, just to hear what his reaction would be.
The I think like it's amazing, and maybe people don't talk about it enough. Is I think like how he doesn't ever want to. He gets bored, and he doesn't want to do similar projects. And I don't know if there's ever been an architect that has done so many different styles, so many different types of golf course. Like, he's got his core tenets, but he's done so much stuff. Like, and I think like one of the things is like when we look back is like, and I just hope in the next 15 years that I'd love to see like maybe wish list for like a Tom project. I'd love somebody to give him a site and say, build me the greatest championship golf course in the world. I'd love to see him think about like building a course for a major championship.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Because I feel like it is because of this point of the schedule, it is, but Memorial Park has not gotten enough praise or credit for how amazing of a test that is like supreme. Like it's one of the busiest
and
courses in America.
Rounds. Yeah.
And it is, you watch these guys, it puts these tour pros into a blender. I mean, I know they had to soften one of the greens because of the players on 17, and they put a giant backboard up behind it this year, which sucks because it's like this amazing short par 4. You were watching guys, you never see tour players hit a wedge off a tee. Guys were hitting wedge into a short par 4 because they were afraid. Like I give the guy a shot. I don't know if he's interested. I haven't, but this is just something I've been thinking about. Is of all the people I want to see build a course for the world's best players, like it seems like it goes to like, I know Davis Love is getting some cracks at Hazeltine. He's going to be doing some work at Sawgrass, but Tom is the one that I think deserves more cracks because he might not want them, but because of what he did at Memorial Park, like that golf course, it's unbelievable with how little land features there are. What he's done, like the golf, like it's hard.
Yeah, I went to the Renaissance Cup there, and I saw the players were vexed. Actually, Luke was my partner in that one too. He actually eagled the 17th hole, so like, it can be done, right?
Yeah.
So I remember Zach Johnson just completely baffled, like missed the wrong part of one of the greens, and he had no idea what to do. But then it's like it's obviously the golf course's fault if they have a shot they can't pull off, right?
Of course.
It would be universally panned, I think, probably for a while.
But that's the way TPC Sawgrass was. I mean, that's the way a lot of the courses in the Golden Age were. If you read about it, it's like, like the best golf courses bother the best players.
So you touched on one thing I wanted to pull on that thread a little bit, because you mentioned all these dialogues you had with Tom and just sort of this encyclopedia of his thought process and background on these courses that would have been, that didn't exist 50, 100 years ago. And I think about all these courses that historically, all these great classic courses, a lot of them is like screwed up over time because they didn't know exactly what they had and they didn't have the right kind of record keeping. I think this like generation of courses, one thing with like Google Earth and all the pictures that are taken, and then obviously with the digital media, hopefully that never happens. And these treasures, these great golf courses have been built in the last 25 years. They don't get a tree planting committee or whatever. Could you imagine like Ballyneal with trees or something like that?
I think the challenges of this era of courses is going to be avoiding trying to mimic other type of courses, and I think the challenges of this era is like homogenization of styles because that's what people like pictures of.
But I think, I guess maybe it's a good time to shift just in sort of like the recent trends in architecture. There have been some pretty bold stuff. Like you think about the courses that have been built in 2023 or opened in 2023, Old Barnwell, especially Tree Farm, the Lido. I think the Lido will have, even though it's a course that existed 80 years ago, will be like an era defining course in terms of it really changed the mindset and the thinking of what golf is or what golf could be for everything coming after it potentially. And that is extremely bold. So I just wonder if the homogenization Lido might actually play a role in sort of breaking that mold. And it'll be interesting to see, because I know Snyder definitely influenced by just seeing Lido in the flesh and taking some of that work to Old Barnwell, probably Blake as well. So I'm interested to see how these architects were influenced by Lido.
I mean, yeah, I feel like I played Lido right around the same time I played Old Barnwell. I played Lido first. I played Lido probably 5 times last year. I was lucky to do, but then I went to Old Barnwell, and it's incredible some of the similarities. Like it doesn't. I don't think like it's not like he copied holes from there, but I do agree with like there's a boldness about the Old Barnwell project that was clearly it had to be influenced by what was happening at the Lido and seeing some of like what was done there. I think that's the toughest thing for architects now is just with maintenance standards. It's hard to build really severe features, right? With how fast I think like sometime like I played the old course right after the Open a couple years ago. Um and I think like to a certain extent some of the like the fairway contours which are like extraordinary, unbelievable. They're muted because the turf was like so I mean the turf was crazy how fast it was. But like the ball never hung on any of the contours, right? They just go to the bottoms.
Mm-hmm.
And then it limits some of the awkward lies, but similarly like it's more profound in the greens. You have to build so much flat space on a bold feature. And I think like with Brian, it's clear like the Travis stuff is the other thing I think that really
Yeah, for
inspires
sure.
him. Because he built some really crazy greens too. But there's like an unapologetic nature to the architecture where it's not um like it's not for the faint of heart. And it's going to rub some people the wrong way. Like without a doubt. Like that golf course makes you feel something. And it could be like I do not like this golf course. But for
But
me it was like I love this golf course.
don't you embrace that though? Because I think
Mhm.
I honestly think there's actually parallels between that and probably the Fried Egg podcast, to tell you the truth, right? Because
Yeah.
I think that it's going to stir some emotion, and I think of like the Fazio courses and built in, dominated the 90s, say, and they're all really good. They're all really good. Like I have nothing bad to say about Fazio and his work, right? But they're sort of universally good, right?
They're
Like
fine.
yeah, and I like, I'm a member of a club that is decidedly not for everybody, but for the people that like it, they love it. And I think what you're seeing probably in Old Barnwell is similar to that. Is like the people, they didn't build it for everybody. They build it for the people that get it, and those people that get it, they're going to bond with other people there on property that also get it and also love it. And if it is not meant for everybody, if you don't like it, then there's another course not too far away that maybe speaks to you better, and that's fine. Now, like, one thing I did want to talk about is like the club TFE events. I think of like I was out caddying at PJ Frisco, and the No Lane Up guys were there, and there was just like a cult following of these NOU guys. But if you looked at a lineup, like, you wouldn't be able to pick an NOU guy from one of the golfers that would just participate, and they're just like, they look all the same to an outsider, right? But the people that are there, like, following these guys to the end of the earth, because they found their tribe. Like, they speak a common language. They listen to everything that they post or that they publish, and they have this common bond with other people that have the same thing. Like you said, you put this stuff out there thinking that somebody would resonate with somebody, and you found this, folks that are willing to pay for it, that want to congregate with other golfers. The thing is, like, nobody's right. Like, nobody has like dominion over the game. Like, nobody's right or wrong in this space. Like, everybody has their own different flavor of what the game means to them. And we don't need to really be poo-pooing the other. Like, I don't think you go to a club TFE event and start bashing the No Lane Up guys, or even like the Barstool guys. They're just like a different
Well,
brand, right? That's fine.
That's what I say to people so many times is like, the beauty of the game of golf is there's like so many different avenues to nerd out on.
Yeah.
What if you want to be into equipment? Like, go read and follow Ryan Barath and Jonathan Wall and the stuff they're doing at golf.com. Like, those guys know so much about, or the TXG YouTube channel. If you want to be into the pro game, there's so many different avenues. And then there's like subsets of how you want to have a relationship with the pro game. Like, what type of stuff do you want? And there's different spectrums to that. And that's what I always say to people is like, people will be like, oh, did you see it? Like, are you worried about Barstool? And I'm like, Barstool and I, like, we swim in completely different oceans, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing about consumers and content is like, I always think about that. I'm a huge NBA fan, and I read Zach Lowe, I read John Hollinger, I read the
You and I could have a
guys.
separate podcast on this.
And I listen to Ryan Russillo and Zach Lowe and Bill Simmons and I listen to the Dunker Spot, JJ Redick. Like, I devour it, but like, I don't devour just one, right? So like, somebody that comes to our events and is a fan of of Fried Egg can also be a fan of No Laying Up, and can also be a fan of Golfers Journal, can also be a fan of Barstool. It's not like they're a fan of yours and nobody else's.
Yeah.
Type situation. It's not like sports where like I'm a Bulls fan and nobody else, right? Like,
well, I think maybe some people think that way, and they may get into it that way, but then when they meet the parties involved,
yeah,
like you have no animosity towards any of these guys, right?
No, like, we're friends. Like, that's the thing. That's been the cool thing too, to watch them. I mean, it's been amazing what they've done. And like, you talk about the early days. Like, I mean, we used to have a partnership with like our newsletter and their pro shop, and those guys have done amazing stuff. And like what they've done with the travel series, the Tour Sauce, the Strapped, has been, they've done a really awesome job pushing independent media in golf, to another level. And I always say this to people is like, when No Laying Up does well, it's really good for me and the brands that they've been able to work with. That's great for all independent media, because they've done such a good job representing the game and what outlets other than the usual suspects can provide for whether it's sponsors, fans, or the game. And they've done an awesome job, and I'm super proud of what they've done. And it's been like really cool to see the impact that they've had on the game. I mean, it's unbelievable when you go through the catalog of their podcasts and the people that they've had on it. They continue to do new stuff too, which is really neat.
Yeah, so let's take an opportunity just to plug the Club TFE stuff, because I think that allows this vehicle for you guys to go deeper on topics and really form a community. Was that sort of the idea behind it?
Yeah, I talked about doing this for like 6 years. And then one day we just finally said we're going to do this. This was an example of the idea that I ideated on too long. But the whole premise is to provide more. Obviously, like one of the things that is hard about being independent media is cash, and we wanted to do more. But like the money that comes in from Club TFE, and I think we provide a lot of articles. We provide a lot. We're doing probably three to four articles a week in there, and then we do monthly videos, monthly hangouts. Really, that money goes to growing our team, because we wanted to keep doing more. And also, like, what we wanted to do was provide a place to have community, have people be able to interact. We've done it. We're on version 1. We've done it with a website with comments. We're excited to get to version 2, where it's a little bit more intuitive. But what our main goal on there is to like do really cool stuff. Whether it's through events, whether it's through the content we're providing, or whether it's through something different in the future. It's what we want to do is provide a beautiful stuff and cool experiences for people that have shared interests.
And then what are the details if somebody wants to get plugged into
So
that?
it's $120 a year. So it's $10 a month. I think one of the early podcasts you want to talk
I remember.
about screw up. I said $120 a month. I got so many texts. I was like, whoops. I think it was like one of the first podcasts I brought it up.
I think it was when it first started, because my friend circle, we were texting like, I like Andy. I don't know if I'm going to pay $120 a month for Andy.
That was definitely not a test. It wasn't. Let's see if we can get them. So it's $120 for the year. The year starts whenever you sign up. I think we'll do 4 or 5 member only events this year. And then we do the content. I think like one of the big things I kind of thought about was like, I want to rate golf courses. So we rate golf courses there. We have a system, a elaborate 1, 2, 3 or no egg system. What do you think about the egg system? Do you like the egg system?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's
You
great.
can tell me it sucks.
No,
this was
it's fine.
this was the hold up to starting this for like 5 years, figuring out.
Well,
how
I
to rate.
think what you said is true. Like, you just want to be honest, right? So I think when it comes to published ratings, you can offend people because they maybe thought it should have been a 4 and you gave it a 3.5 or whatever the case may be, right? The people's
We
feelings
still
get hurt.
offend people. I still am informed when I've offended somebody with a rating, and then I usually point to we gave Oak Hill 0 eggs. So,
It's better
if
than
you're
nothing.
unhappy with your 1 egg, Oak Hill got 0.
I do want to mention, speaking of text, a couple months ago, I was just hitting balls in my golf room up here, and I get a text from Andy Johnson asking me this question about the 100-hole hike. And I was just like completely innocuous, like just thinking like, oh, I'll just answer his question. And lo and behold, you were recording the Shotgun Start live at the time. And so I remember.
I think I kept you anonymous. I said you were an inside source, an inside source.
An inside source who was very heavily involved in the 100-hole hike. Like, it didn't.
Unnamed. It was unnamed inside source.
Yeah. So, anyways, I got a lot of texts that morning. Were you this inside source that Andy's referring to? It was pretty obvious it was me. But anyways, always happy to help.
My bad.
Yeah.
if that cost you any harm.
No, not
maybe
at all.
not my finest reporting moment.
No, it was really Johnny on the spot reporting. So that was kind of fun. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk about the 100-hole hike.
About if a par 3 if a 100-hole hike on a par 3 course counted.
All right, so we gotta go there, right? Because I know what your stance is. when I started the 100 hole hike, like we had these rules in place, and basically it was that you had to keep a score, you had to putt everything out, and it had to be on a regulation golf course. That was really the genesis of it. We didn't want it there to be any sort of shortcuts. It's like you're going way above and beyond for a cause that you truly believe in. And I don't manage it actively anymore, but I'm still kind of the founder, right? So, and I don't really want to push back too hard, because seeing it has taken a life of its own, and lives are being positively impacted. I mean, Youth on Course has taken it in a different direction, but they're getting, they got blocky, right? Doing a 100 hole hike. They've gotten more golf.
I think that was the whole genesis of the question. We were in blocky mania.
Yeah, it was the peak blocky mania. But anyways, so yeah, if I were to do a 100 hole hike, it wouldn't be on a par 3 course. I was actually Luke was toying with doing one when he was much, much younger, and they were going to do it at the Cantini Youth Links, but we could never get it sorted out. Like a kid doing it on a par 3 course. That's fine.
Kid
right.
doing I got to do it one year. I don't know when I'm going to do it, but I have to.
I was toying with the idea of, I think you stirred up some stuff, and I was toying with the idea of actually bringing it back to life if there was enough positive energy and excitement to do it. And maybe like the OGs like myself wouldn't actively run it, but we could serve on some sort of like advisory board in terms of making sure that it continues to meet the spirit and direction of what it was intended to do. So.
Well, it's an amazing thing that you started. And this is the thing, the ideas start and they evolve, and it's kind of the way it works, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, you gotta take that leap of faith and just trust that it will resonate with people. And like you said, you send these emails out. Like I was just scouring people that I had hosted at Ballyneel or played with years ago, and say, hey, I'm trying to raise some money for this guy, Ben Cox. And then it started this whole thing. And here we are almost 15 years later, and probably $7-8 million later raised for charity for different causes, all because of, one guy decided to take a leap of faith.
One guy just started to do a crazy thing that he probably was naive about how hard it was going to be to block 100 holes.
Or start a golf media company in your case, right?
Well, that's the thing. That's a lot of the world is somebody that's stupid enough to think they can do something.
I want to bring this full circle, because I think when you pursue something with a passion, and especially in this great game, you take care of the game takes care of you. I truly believe that. A year ago, I believe it was a year ago, you got to play Augusta after the Masters. Like, was that like a total, like if you think about this whole evolution of where this thing started, newsletter to 10 people to, 8-9 years later, playing at Augusta as a function of just like your passionate pursuit of following the game, holding up the tenets of the game that you truly believe in. Like that had to have been a pretty emotional thing, right? Like all of a sudden you're standing on the first tee at Augusta National.
Yeah. I think like the way I would, so I haven't played tournament golf in a few years. And one of the things, and you'll probably appreciate this as a dad, after every tournament, like the first person I call is my dad. And we like talk about the round. We get into it.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like it's always on my way home from a tournament. And I think like the thing about that is it was an amazing experience. I was nervous on the first tee, which is silly. Like you're playing with like 3 random people. There's no reason to be nervous, but it's like all the memories of your life watching the Masters. But I played the round, and I didn't think about this, but I got in my car to go to the airport, and like there was no like I just like called my dad like immediately.
Yeah.
And I mean that's what that to me means a round was really special, is when if I'm not with him, like even sometimes when he would he'd caddy for me in some amateur stuff, like if I would get into match play at an event, he'd come caddy. And like even sometimes after he caddied for me, I'd call him and we'd talk about the round, like, and so yeah, that's how, I don't know. It was amazing. I could talk about that round for hours, but yeah, the thing that was special, like I think about it, it was a lot of like nostalgia, but there's been a lot of other cool moments along the way. That one was like a just a cool personal thing to get to do. But yeah, even like I remember the first time I got an email about like how much somebody appreciated what I was doing. That like I remember that, and that stands out a ton. So it's been fun. It's cool. It's cool to get to do neat stuff like that. But it's it yeah, it's been fun. I don't have a great answer there.
Well, I want to pull on this a little bit because I'm just fascinated. Because like the one thing I have to say about this, hopefully you felt this, but collectively, your friends, followers of your podcast and your stuff, myself included, couldn't have been more excited for you. It was almost like, because a lot of us will probably never get to play Augusta, but we felt like we were playing it because we were like living vicariously through this opportunity that you had. And I think because we know like the blood, sweat, and tears, and you just lay yourself out there like in every episode out there, and people truly appreciate it. That there was like this emotional bond between the people that listen to you and follow you and just root for you, that you were able to have this. Like I said, full circle. It's like I couldn't have been more excited for you. I may never play Augusta, who knows? But like I'm super excited that you got the opportunity to play us.
I'll never forget it. That week I was listening to a song that like it was like 17 by the Lagoons. Like it got stuck in my playlist, like, and I was listening to it a lot. And there's like a lyric in the song that's like, don't stop imagining the day you do is the day that you'll die. And it stuck with me because like that's like the thing is like I had given up on 10 years ago the idea of me playing. Like you think you're gonna play it as a kid, and then you grow up and you realize you're never gonna play it. But then I ended up playing. So like that's my point to you. It's like you could never give up on the dream, because that's not it.
Yeah. So anyways, it was awesome just spending time with you, Andy. I do want to say real quick, you helped me tremendously 6 months ago, like get this thing up and running, and just give me advice and encouraging me to do it. So I definitely appreciate it. And like I said, super thrilled for everything that you got going on, and just look forward to, keeping the dialogue up. Text me anytime.
Jim, I'm excited to see where this goes, and thanks so much for having me on.
Andrew Lewis, welcome back to the Angle of Attack with Andrew Lewis. How's it going, man?
Hey, Jim, what's going on, man?
Yeah, it's going great, man. We got this series going. Last time we finished our series talking about the 80 shooter, kind of going down to the 78 shooter. This is really that next tier of 78 going down to 76. We had Andy Johnson talking earlier in this episode. And he actually played a state amateur with Nick Hardy back in Illinois. And Nick Hardy shot 28 under and won by 10. So eventually we're going to get there. We're going to do all the way down to where we are now, to the separators, to elite junior golfers, and probably what separates, the top pros from the best in the world. So this should be a fun series.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're bearing the lead. How does someone shoot another kid shot 18 under? 28 under, and I would have thought he won by 20.
Yeah,
well, it must have been pretty easy.
Yeah, TK Kelly, who I think his Corn Ferry.
Oh, wow.
He came in second. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Good players shoot low.
Yeah. So this 78 to 76, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, because I see this as potentially like right in the wheelhouse for, I think, good, decent high school golfers. A lot of high school golf teams, like, their number 4, their number 5 guy, they're probably shooting in the mid to high 70s. And I think if you can get consistently to sort of that mid 70s level, or sometimes even going lower, that can really be a difference between like cementing yourself into a lineup making the state tournament, like having those great experiences that high school golf teams definitely offer. Yeah, so there's a lot of golfers right there. And then probably, that gets you in the cusp of, starting to be more competitive and being able to play in some of the local, tournament golf as well. So is that sort of your experience in terms of like this score range and the type of client that you typically see that's maybe in the score range?
Yeah, I would totally agree. Especially with like the high school stuff. I think especially a good high school team, any high school team that has like a fourth or fifth guy that can basically break 80 to 76, they're probably going to be a pretty good team. I think with this type of player, like you'll get done with playing around, and for example, let's say a kid I coach plays with someone and they get done with their round and you swear they shot 80 but they shot 76. Like, I don't think that these type of players or these type of rounds necessarily like look that much different than someone that shoots 80 or 78. It's the nuanced things that you don't necessarily notice as you go through the round that at the end of the round adds up to like 2 to 4 shots better. And I think where those things like that we're kind of blind to, the first one is the amount of like the chipping proximity and the difference between chipping it to 8 feet versus 11 feet or 6 feet versus 8 feet. Like every time that you chip it just a couple feet closer, obviously we've talked about the strokes gained stuff, and just by being 1 foot closer makes everything just that much easier. But that's probably the biggest thing I see as this separator is not necessarily having some massively deep toolbox of shots, but like when they do have the opportunity to chip, it's not even necessarily a great shot. It just in general is just a little bit closer than the guy that's shooting 78 to 80. And then the other one would be once they are hitting those chips, they just seem to make, a couple more putts inside 10 feet. I would say their touch and their green reading is just slightly better. This also might be a player that kind of like knows their game really well, and they know that for them to kind of get a lot out of it, they have to be good at these things. So they may have prioritized like their green reading and their short putting, and their proximity chipping, to where they're not necessarily the best ball striker, but they kind of come off as like they're just pretty good at scoring. That's kind of where I would like label this person. Again, it's not necessarily looking like a ton different though. So I'm always surprised when I see these kind of kids. It's like, I swear you shot 82. It's like you shot 77, 76. It's a great skill to have, to be able to shoot around like that when it doesn't necessarily like look like it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think when I'm reading between the lines here a little bit, it sounds like they likely have a strong work ethic, right? Because there's like hours that need to be spent on a putting green. And I think they probably have a good coach, right? Which is like helping them get the most out of their game. So I'm interested to hear, because I think I know where you stand on this, but like let's talk chipping a little bit more like tactical. What are some of the things, like maybe it's like drills that you prescribe, both from the chipping aspect and also like putting? I think you're a really strong proponent on aim point, and like form work, and like a real like a protocol when it comes to sort of those 4 to 6 foot putts. And there's probably a lot for people to get from that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a kid today whose scoring average is 80, and he came, and to your point on coaching, he's had a coach for 2 years, never had done a putting or short game lesson. And so I said to him, like, the lowest hanging fruit is just to get a little bit better at these things. And sure enough, his shot selection around the greens was very different than what I would have chosen. And then his ability to start the ball on line and read putts is just, it's as if someone that shoots a 90. And that's not his fault. He really doesn't know how to practice those things. So I would say, as far as short game, as we talked about in previous sessions, I hate hitting like a ton of balls to the same hole. I just don't think that necessarily helps anybody. What I like to do is I like to do like 4 and 5 ball sets from a specific location. And I like to establish a proximity, like from here. Let's say it's just like 5 feet off the green, 6 feet off the green. Not one that you would necessarily putt, but you probably feel like you need to chip it to a very just like average pin. Like that's probably going to be a 3, 4, or 5 foot proximity. So if I give a player 5 balls, can they average 4 or 5 feet from there? It's either yes or no. If they can't, then we talk about it. Or if they're not with me, they have to figure out a solution to that. And doing that through 4 or 5 different situations, downslopes, upslopes, long-sided, short-sided, downwind, into the wind. Because eventually, I mean, to be able to shoot 76, you don't have to have every shot. You just have to, in general, be able to hit most of your shots close. And then on short putting, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, all you have to do to make short putts, it's not even much about touch control as much as it is start the ball in line and green reading. I think the majority of the time when I see kids struggle with putts, they hit them too low and they hit them too hard. That's a deadly combo. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have seen like 3-putt from 5 feet because they don't play enough breaks. So then instinctively our brain knows we don't have enough breaks, so we just hit the putts too hard. So I would. My advice would just be like, if you're not working on that with your coach, I'm not saying that you should fire them, but you should have a frank conversation. Like, listen, I need help with this stuff. It's just one of those things though that people are like, yeah, I'm good enough at it. I'm good enough at putting. I'm good enough at chipping, and that they're not recognizing the subtlety of like that's the reason that they're shooting 80 or 78 versus 76 or 75. So, the only other thing I would say is I like to have very objective outcomes to drills. So if I mean, today in a group session, we did a 3 to 7 foot game and they had to make 15 out of 20. And if they couldn't make 15 out of 20, they had to correlate as to why they couldn't make 15 out of 20, then go practice that skill and come and do it again. They couldn't leave until they did that. So stuff like that. I mean, if you can do stuff like that, then you're probably going to putt fine. If you can roll through the 5-ball sets, you're probably going to chip fine. And if you can't, then you're really going to hope that you hit the ball really well that day because you're probably not going to shoot 76. That's kind of how I would look at it.
Would you correlate like a 4-foot putt to like a free throw? And when I'm thinking about like with respect to being a good free throw shooter, they're going to follow the same rhythm, the same process. And obviously, like that's been honed over years, like literally, right? Where it's almost like they could do it in their sleep. Like, is that what you see, from people that have put in the work? Like it's like there's a certain like rhythm, like what they own that rhythm. Like it doesn't necessarily have to look a certain way, but like they kind of maintain a consistent kind of pattern and routine for each 4-footer that they face.
Yeah, I would say that's the case, like inside 5 feet for sure. Because it's not as much about green reading at that point, right? Like you're not playing a ton of break on those. Yeah, I would say there's a rhythm and a cadence to the whole routine up to the stroke. To where most of the time it's, left edge to right edge, somewhere in the middle of the hole. And that, it's actually interesting because good free throw shooters, make about 90%.
Yeah.
Good 4-footers should be about 90%. So yeah, that's a good correlating. That's your March Madness. You're obviously watching a lot of basketball.
Yeah, you mentioned one interesting thing, like if you can get a sense of their read, and maybe it's like a 1 or 2% break, right? But like I love the inside, for me, like inside left edge putt. Like I would never really aim a left to right breaking putt, like start it left center, right? Because if you start it inside left, you have all this like margin for error that's going to is still going to fall in. Like I see, like you was talking about missing low, which is like, maybe you aim just left center, you tug it, and then it ends up missing low side. Yeah, like that sort of thing. So yeah, I think I've had pretty good success just like being super committed to the line. And I know that you are a proponent of using the line on the ball. I typically don't. But I think that's more out of laziness. Anything else?
Don't want to bend down.
Yeah. But have you?
I mean,
I don't know. Has anyone done like a study like with the line, without the line? Is it?
Yeah, I feel like somebody did, and it was like 80 or 85% of tour players were using the line. I think so. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of aim point. I just like the objective nature of aim point, right? So if it's 3% on stemp at whatever. It's just this much break. Like it just is what it is. That doesn't mean that you have to hit it with that much break. You could hit it a little firmer or a little softer. But in general, Justin Rose said it best when he was winning the Masters a few years ago. Someone asked him about aim point, and he said, "It just gives me a good ballpark. You don't have to freak out about it. But if you are going to use the fingers, it gives you a very like objective spot to aim your line, and then you just aim your line there. I think it works great. It makes a lot of sense. But, the thing with green reading is it's really hard to teach feel or vision. But as soon as you're doing aim point, it's very easy to teach those things because it's like measuring wind. Like if you ask a non-golfer tomorrow, it's going to be blowing like 20 miles an hour. If you ask a non-golfer, they'll be like 5 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour.
Yeah,
They'll
yeah.
have no idea. It's the same thing with like slope on the greens. If you've never done it or used a level, you have no idea. But it's so easy to learn like how to feel the slope. And I'd say it's the same with like using the line of the ball. A lot of people are terrible at lining up the ball because they never really have been taught how to line up the ball or how to scope the line like once it's lined up. So they're all skills. Like all of these things have to be learned and developed and enhanced. But there is a reason that a majority of tour players use the line. There is a reason that guys like Dustin Johnson and Max Homa and Lydia Ko and Adam Scott do aim points because it's really helpful. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
a big proponent of both of those things.
Yeah, I mean, look at Keegan Bradley. Like he had to go
Yeah.
from he sort of resurrected his career, I think, using aim point.
Yeah.
You mentioned scoping, and I know I've seen Luke do this, and he's definitely bought into the aim point, and he's
And
obviously
he works
put in
hard
the
at
hours.
it. He works
Yeah.
very hard at it. He uses his level every time I see him.
But the scoping, I think, is an interesting nuance. Maybe you can expound on that a bit. Like this is like once you have it lined up, is sort of standing back a ways from the ball. I think using either the shaft or like the face of the putter to make sure it's actually aligned exactly where you want it to go.
Yeah, so when I'm doing putting lessons, I have someone line the ball up. I almost always check. I'll have them put a marker or a tee kind of where they think they're lining it, and then they'll line their ball up there. And almost always, just based on your initial line, it's not exactly at that point. And it's very, very hard to identify just visually looking or even bending down to see like where exactly is that line. So scoping is basically using a parallel line, or you can cover up the line of the ball, and it shows you, because the shaft is vertical, like further up, where the shaft actually is relative to the hole. So it's very, very helpful for the precision. Like I think even Bryson doesn't. So if Bryson does it, obviously it's precise, precise enough for him, just so that you don't blame the wrong thing. Using the line is strictly for aim. For example, the kid that I had today that can't start the ball online, he did start the ball online multiple times after we fixed it. And he was missing his gate by like 4 inches because he was aimed so far left. He had no idea that he was aiming so poorly. And so it's just, people need help with aim. And then once they're using the line, I don't know anyone who doesn't scope their line that's a good putter, because it's just really, really hard to aim.
Yeah, that's interesting. One
Again,
other thing
though,
I wanted
all skills that have to be worked on.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned just it triggered a thought in my mind, or just around aiming. A couple of years ago, I stumbled across this like video series by Adele Golf. They make these custom putters. And I know David Adele a little bit, but he basically, everybody aim, like you could hand a putter to like 4 different people and they would all aim that putter differently, right? Depending, and if you like, they have these customized where they switch out the lines, and it's almost amazing. Like, if it had 2 lines versus 1 or no line, how that just changes your mental kind of, alignment. So, I mean, I think there's one thing to look at. I don't know if you've dug into this in terms of like putter fittings around and what it potentially could do to alignment, because that could be a potentially a low hanging fruit. Like somebody just might not have the right putter for them, right? And they don't know why they're missing these putts right. There just might be an inherent bias to them, So the putter may be super fancy. It might be a Scotty Cameron or whatever, but maybe it's just not suited for the particular golfer, right?
I actually used to fit Adele putters.
Oh, really?
Back in the day, yes.
Oh.
And they do a cool aim test. My 2 counters to that would be, 1, you don't have to be aiming directly where you want to be.
Yeah, it's just consistently, right?
Yeah, as long as you can do something fairly consistent, I'd say within like a degree or so is pretty good. And then 2, when I used to fit people, using the mirror and the laser, I don't remember if I was told this, but they wouldn't necessarily use the line. So I would agree 100%. Like if you just throw the putter down with a white ball, no line, I think most people don't aim very well. And yes, changing the putter configuration, mallet to blade, 3 lines, dot, no line, is going to change it. But I just haven't seen when someone uses like a thicker black drawn line that they can't, in general, aim their putter pretty well. I'd say most people more have a problem with putting like the center of the face on the line, probably more than like aiming it super left or right. But yeah, that is an interesting fitting process for sure. I mean, I people are always way off. But I don't necessarily see that as like a massive problem. But it's again, check the box on stuff. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
It's a good putter. I still have my putter. The best putting round I ever had was with an Adele putter.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Anyways, we're off on a tangent here.
Yeah, tangent. We can keep going.
I think you need, if you're in this space, like a golfer, like you said, might be the number 5 guy and they want to be the number 3 guy on their team.
Yeah.
Or you want to be more competitive in tournaments. You have to be willing to take a close look at these different things and be open to the fact of like, hey, let's do a little bit of trial and error and see if there's something there, right? And
For sure.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, if listeners, you've found something, like leave a comment here. Go to Andrew Lewis Golf, go to Driven Golf Analytics, ask questions. We're happy to help. If you found anything that worked for you, we're happy to hear it. We'd love to hear about it.
Would love to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
You got it.
The Driven Golf Podcast is produced by Joseph K. If you like this episode, like it, subscribe, pass it on to a friend who might be interested. It really helps us out a lot. We'll be back in a couple weeks with the next episode. Until then, remember, in this great game, the journey is the gift. Enjoy the journey.
Yo. All right. It all starts with a kid from Chicagoland, went for warm golf all day with a club in hand, playing sets, gaming sets at the age of 10. Got caught up in the game, there's no escaping it. Caddy yard, call it car, yeah, the no one crew. Parts got it hard, yeah, getting so good, so short. Acres road, drive a forward, true game, still your soul like it's no need to burn out in high tech. 2 worlds collided, start the fried egg, passion ignited. 37-1 kid, no need for fighting. Vocal so smooth, I can't quite describe it. Dreading out this Friday line. Off one day, it can't be denied. So recommended, man, 3X no lie. Yeah, there I say it. Alright. 0 to 60 in a flash. Soapbox antics, steady doing numbers full of mathematics. The golf world impacted, love him or hate it. His style off copy, but it's never duplicated. Andy in the house, the man's a true original. Authentic to himself, passion unequivocal. Give props to the OG, eccentric individual. Fried egg taking over into every dish. I've been dreaded about this Friday line.